Hey Rebel Rouser, I'm Alan Voivod, and this is Star Wars 7 by 7. So today is the next in a series of looks at the Last Jedi novelization by Jason Fry. Today we're actually looking at chapters 5 and 6 of the novel, which feature the first meeting of Rey and Luke Skywalker, and also a scene that we did not get to see in The Last Jedi, but we walked in on just as it was ending, and that's the conversation between Supreme Leader Snoke and General Hux after the debacle of Dakar. Or at least it seemed like it was a debacle, but naturally it wasn't, as we all know, because the First Order was able to track the Resistance through hyperspace. And this is a conversation between Snoke and Hux where Snoke is kind of caught on his heels a bit. He has no real feel for the technology situation that the First Order has implemented. And you know, it's kind of interesting because there is a reference to the aliens that are hanging out in Snoke's throne room, and these are the people that helped blaze a trail through the unknown regions, blaze hyperspace trails through the unknown regions specifically. So Snoke is at least aware of the value of technology and the idea that, hey, we need some brilliant minds to figure this stuff out. But he's not necessarily aware of the kinds of things that the First Order is capable of from a technological standpoint. And I guess you can kind of forgive him for that, right? He's supposed to be leading the joint. He's not necessarily supposed to have his fingers in every little experimental technology pie or anything like that, but he does seem a little bit surprised to discover, oh, we can track them through hyperspace. You can do something that no other military commander has ever done, Hux? Really? You? Is kind of the implication. And Hux explains it to Supreme Leader Snoke, and Snoke's reaction is, oh, so this isn't a work of genius, this is a work of brute force. So continuing to lay the smackdown on Hux, and Hux is like, hey, brute force, you know, it kind of gets a bad rap sometimes. Sometimes we need brute force to do the work we got to do. We also learn in this scene from Hux a little bit of the drama that's been going on since the destruction of the Hosnian system. Hux tells Snoke that surviving senators have dissolved task forces and are heading back to their own planets to worry about the interplanetary defenses of their own homeworlds. So yeah, any hope of a new republic massing together or banding together what little remains of it to fight the First Order, that idea is getting quashed rather early on in the novel. So yeah, it doesn't look good for the Resistance or the New Republic early on. I mean, it was bad enough the Hosnian system got smashed. You thought that maybe there was a little bit of hope, even with the destruction of Starkiller Base, even with the escape of the Resistance from the First Order arrival on Dakar, but yeah, I mean, maybe it's a factor of having seen the movie prior to reading the novelization, of course, or listening to the novelization as I'm doing in this case, but yeah, the threads of hope and then having hope taken away from you are rather jarring emotionally in the novelization experience. And we also find out that the reason why Hux is walking out as Kylo's walking in is because Hux has just gotten word that the First Order has determined the likely location of where the Resistance jumped to, and so he has asked to be excused so he can go off and coordinate the jump into hyperspace and go arrive dramatically at the location of where the Resistance has thought they have escaped to. Anyway, so that's what you need to know about the Snuck and Hoax scene. Snuck and Hoax? I can't believe I just did that. Snoke and Hux. That's great. But before that, we get the scene with Luke and Rey and Chewie and R2 on Ahch-To. And I have to tell you, there's not a heck of a lot there that's different from the movie. So you find out that Chewie, says, I could go, but there's too much to repair on the Falcon, so I'm not going to go. So obviously he's got more going on in his head about that, I think, and, probably a bit of grief about Han still. So yeah, he decides not to go up to meet Luke, and R2 actually expresses an interest, but the stairs are just too daunting for him, so he doesn't do it. And so the climb is spent in Rey's head a lot of the time, and it's a neat little reflection on how she arrived at this place and all the things that are occurring to her as she makes this journey up the Jedi steps. And when she gets to Luke, it plays out basically as you saw it in the theater, where he takes the lightsaber and then he tosses it over his shoulder. We don't get into Luke's head during this scene. It is all about Rey and her trying to understand what Luke is doing here, but we don't get any depth or insight into Luke. I'm not necessarily saying that's a bad thing or anything like that. I'm just saying it is what it is. This is all done from Rey's perspective. But as for Chewie, of course, he does eventually get involved, and we do get to see the scene where he bursts into Luke's hut, tearing the door off the hinges, and yeah, all of that stuff. And again, that also happens very similarly to what happens in the movie, although there's reference to not just him bringing out a laser sword and standing up to the whole First Order, but he also asks her, what do you think a few dozen Jedi could do? And she's kind of speechless at that. And again, same reactions as what you saw in the movie. The lone difference is a note that Rey wasn't necessarily going to be the one to make Chewie have to tell Luke what happened to Han, that she was going to be the one to step up and, respect Chewie's grief and not make it so difficult for Chewie in this process. And so she was going to be the one who would tell Luke what happened to Han. But we don't actually get the scene where she says, Han's dead, and then Luke reacts to it or anything like that. That doesn't happen in the novelization either. And at least so far, another thing that hasn't happened in the novelization is a certain waterfowl appearance. I mean, the Porgs have not been mentioned by name. They have been mentioned by, these cute little birds that don't look like they should be able to fly, but they're certainly managing it. And there's a little warbling noise here and there. So you hear a little, but not that classic Porg noise that we've all come to know and love. And that's a poor impression of it, but it's enough where I know it's in your head now. So yeah, that has not shown up in the audiobook yet either, and I'm very curious to see whether it will at some point in the future. And that's going to do it for the majority of this episode. There is a little bit of bonus content over on the audio version of this podcast at sw7x7.com/iTunes or wherever you like to listen to podcasts. Specifically, there is a mention in the novelization about how it is that Kylo Ren was able to absorb a shot from Chewie's bowcaster and not be blown to bits. So I'll talk about that over there. Do check it out and subscribe if you are into such things. But for this video, at least, it remains for me to say thank you so much for watching, and may the Force be with you wherever in the world you may be.